Hello, my name is Daniel. Thank you for being here with me today. If you enjoy real, heartbreaking cheating stories from Reddit, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot to me. This is one of those stories that stays with you, not because it's loud or dramatic, but because of how quiet and heavy the pain feels. The kind of pain that doesn't scream, it just settles in and refuses to leave. The original poster, whom I'll call Mason, is 36 years old and lives in a quiet suburb outside of Portland, Oregon. About 5 years ago, Mason moved over 900 miles from his hometown in Texas for a new job. Not long after settling in, he met Lena, who would eventually become his wife. They married after 2 years together, and life began to feel stable again. Then one summer, an old friend from back home, someone Mason had known since high school, reached out. His name was Theo, and at the time, he just needed a break. Mason, always the loyal type, didn't hesitate. He let Theo stay with them while he got back on his feet. During that visit, Theo met Lena's younger sister, Ava. She was 30, a single mom to a bubbly 5-year-old daughter from a previous relationship. Her daughter's father was still involved and shared custody, so Ava had been living with her parents to help manage expenses. Theo and Ava hit it off almost instantly. It wasn't just chemistry, they genuinely connected. Within months, they were officially dating, and after a year of long commutes and Ava still struggling with rent, Theo moved in with her. Everyone thought it was going well. But almost 2 years into their relationship, everything unraveled. Theo discovered Ava had been unfaithful. Not a misunderstanding, not a suspicion. It was irrefutable. Screenshots, photos, messages. Mason didn't share the details, but he said Theo was shattered. Not angry, just hollow. He didn't confront her directly. He couldn't. But he also couldn't keep living in the same apartment, pretending things were okay. So he turned to Mason, not for judgment, just for help. Mason, being the kind of friend that most people only wish they had, acted quickly. He reached out to colleagues, people who didn't know Lena, Ava, or anyone in that circle, and found Theo a small rental about 40 minutes outside the city, just enough distance to breathe. Conveniently, a few weeks later, Lena, Ava, their mom, and Ava's daughters were heading out of town to visit family. With the apartment empty, Mason helped Theo pack up, which, as it turned out, was most of the place. Theo had paid for nearly everything. He left quietly, respectfully. He wrote a long email to Ava, explained why he was leaving, left a check to cover rent and utilities through the end of their lease, and informed the landlord he wouldn't be renewing. Then he disappeared. When Ava found the email during the trip, she called Theo repeatedly. No answer. That's when Lena got involved. She called Mason, asking what was going on. He told her the truth. Theo had left, he was safe, but refused to say where he was. When they returned home, Ava went into a rage, furious over what Theo had taken, things that, truthfully, belonged to him in the first place. Lena grew cold. Her calls turned into demands. Where is he? Why won't you tell me? Mason held firm. Theo was safe. That's all she needed to know. But over the next few weeks, the tension boiled. Lena begged, pleaded, threatened. At one point, she even tried to use Mason's phone while he was sleeping, trying to impersonate him to get in contact with Theo. He found out and immediately changed all his passwords. She accused him of betrayal. We're married. This is my family. I deserve to know. Mason didn't budge. Even when she said this, hiding Theo might be reason enough to divorce. What's worse is that Lena knew Ava had cheated. Ava admitted it weeks later. Still, Lena insisted she had no idea beforehand. Mason believes her. They were never close, and before Theo entered their lives, They only saw Ava every few months. Since Theo came around, though, they saw her more, not because of family ties, but because Theo was Mason's friend. And now it felt like that bond was being weaponized. Ava lost someone who truly cared for her, and now Mason might lose someone too, all because he stood by a friend who did nothing wrong except love the wrong person. And that's where things stood, for now. He was the one who'd been betrayed, not Ava, not Lena. It was Theo who came home one day and discovered the woman he loved had been lying to him for months. And now Mason was being made to feel like the criminal for standing beside the only person in this mess who hadn't done anything wrong. The worst part? Lena's anger didn't seem rooted in loyalty to her sister. No, it felt deeper than that, messier, more personal. People online were quick to weigh in, some harsh, others blunt, but all of them painfully clear. One comment stuck with Mason. It read, "Ava made her bed. Now she gets to lie in it. The fact that your wife is more upset that Theo left than the fact her sister cheated tells you everything you need to know." Another person asked a question Mason had been avoiding. Why do they need to know where Theo lives? It's over. She cheated, he left. That's it. But of course, nothing was ever that simple. The roles were reversed, the pain displaced, and suddenly Mason found himself walking on eggshells in his own marriage. More than once, he'd asked Lena how she would feel if things were flipped, if Ava had left and Mason had tried to dig for her new address. Would she still call it love, or would she call it control? It didn't matter. Lena wouldn't hear it. She clung to this idea that Mason was betraying her trust, not by hurting her, but by refusing to give up someone she now viewed as expendable. She saw Theo's absence not as protection, but as punishment. Mason started lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling while Lena shifted beside him. Some nights she cried. Other nights she was ice cold, but no matter what mood she was in, the pressure never stopped. At one point, he even told her Theo had moved again and hadn't shared his new address. It was partly true. Theo had grown more distant even from Mason. But it didn't stop Lena. She tried using Mason's phone again. He had to set up two-step authentication just to breathe. "You want to divorce me because your sister cheated on my friend?" Mason didn't respond. She just stared at him. And that silence hurt more than any shouting match ever could. Online, someone else put it perfectly. If she truly believes this is divorce-worthy, then maybe the marriage was already cracked before this. Maybe you're just now seeing who she really is. Mason didn't want to believe that, not after everything they'd built. But the pieces were shifting under him. Trust was bleeding out, and the life he'd worked so hard to create was starting to feel like it belonged to someone else. The reality hit harder a few weeks later. Lena slipped. In a heated argument with Ava, she admitted, out loud, that Mason knew where Theo was. And just like that, the storm came crashing down. Ava began calling, non-stop. So did Lena's mother. Messages, voicemails, even an email from Ava's daughter's father asking for clarity. It was like they'd formed a circle and placed Mason at the center. He refused to respond. Ava showed up at the house once, shouting from the porch. Mason didn't open the door. He just stood inside, clutching his phone, heart racing, unsure how they'd all come to this. After that incident, he laid down a line. He told Ava she wasn't welcome in their home until she apologized for everything, not just to Theo, but to him, for the manipulation, the entitlement, the complete lack of remorse. She refused. Of course she did. So Mason didn't see her again, or his in-laws, For over a month, the house felt quieter, but not peaceful, just empty. By April, Ava was back living with Lena's parents, dragging her daughter back into a house that had always felt tense, always teetering on the edge of something unspoken, and now it was only getting worse. Then Lena approached Mason again. She wanted Ava and her daughter, Mason's niece by marriage, to move in with them. Just for a little while, she said, just until Ava gets on her feet. Mason said no. There was no hesitation in his voice, but there was heartbreak. He hated what this was doing to Lena, but more than that, he hated that she couldn't see what this was doing to him. That's when she finally explained why she'd been acting the way she had. And what she said next didn't make things better. It only made them harder to forgive. Lena's voice trembled when she finally admitted why she'd been acting the way she had. For weeks, Mason had sensed something deeper, something beyond loyalty or sisterhood, and now it came pouring out in a quiet, cracked whisper. If Ava loses the apartment, he's going to go for full custody. She was talking about Ava's ex, her daughter's father, who had made it clear that if Ava moved back into her parents' home, he would file for sole custody. The neighborhood Lena's parents lived in wasn't exactly safe, and Ava's history with her father was volatile at best. The shouting matches, the slammed doors, the tension that hung like fog in every hallway. It wasn't the kind of place for a child to grow up. And now, that threat was becoming real. Mason understood the fear in Lena's eyes, but he couldn't ignore the way she had twisted that fear into blame. Blame for him. Blame for Theo. She wouldn't be back at my parents' house if you had told us, Lena said. We could have worked something out. We could have helped her stay. Mason stood there, stunned. Worked something out? She cheated, Lena. Theo left because she broke his heart. She could have apologized. She did. He didn't accept it. It wasn't that Mason didn't care about Ava's daughter. He did. She was innocent in all this, a quiet little girl who used to draw him pictures every time they visited. But protecting Ava's comfort at the cost of Theo's healing, it wasn't fair, and Lena couldn't see that. Despite everything, Theo had agreed to speak to Ava again. Mason hadn't pushed him. He simply mentioned that she had asked, and after a long pause, Theo said, "Fine. A call, that's it." They spoke over FaceTime the previous weekend. Theo sat outside his new place, trees swaying behind him, the setting sun casting a tired glow over his face. Ava appeared on screen from her bedroom, fidgeting, her voice too cheerful at first, almost rehearsed. She apologized. Not for the cheating specifically, but for how things ended. She asked Theo if they could talk in person. He said no. She asked again, this time saying, "For my daughter's sake." That's when Theo's expression changed. He didn't yell. He didn't insult her. He simply said, "Goodbye," and hung up. There were no follow-up texts, no second call. That was the last straw. Theo hadn't needed to talk to her at all, but he gave her that small window, and she tried to use her child as a bargaining chip. Mason couldn't shake the feeling that Lena would have done the same, and that terrified him. Online, the feedback was growing sharper, more direct. "Your wife is delusional," one comment read. "Do not let Ava move in. She will never leave." Another person wrote, "You're the only adult in this entire mess. Lena blaming you and Theo for a custody situation Ava created is insane. She blew up her own life. He owes her nothing." And the part that stung the most? You set boundaries, you stuck to them, and you protected someone who needed space to heal. That's not betrayal. That's love with a backbone. Mason read that one more than once. The loneliness in the house was growing, not just from the absence of in-laws or family dinners, but the space that now sat between him and Lena. They still shared a bed, still shared meals, but every conversation felt like a test. Every silence, a wall they weren't allowed to cross. She still looked at him like he'd chosen sides. And maybe he had, but only because one side had lied, cheated, and burned everything to the ground, while the other had simply walked away with nothing but their dignity. Loyalty doesn't mean blindness, he'd told her once. She hadn't responded then, either. The final comment he read that week was brutal, but honest. Your wife still sees Ava as the victim, and that says more about her than anything else. If she can't see what her sister did, if she keeps making excuses, you might want to rethink who you're married to. Mason didn't reply to that one. But for the first time since Theo left, he started to wonder if he was the one who needed to pack a bag next. It started slowly. The looks, the tone, the way Camille would talk to me like I was a personal assistant instead of her younger sister. At first I told myself it was just the stress of planning a wedding, that maybe under the pressure people just stop acting like themselves. But by the second month of prep, I wasn't sure who she was anymore. I'm 31, Camille is 35. I'd hoped being her maid of honor would bring us closer. We'd never been particularly bonded growing up, and this seemed like a chance to finally feel included. But instead, it became a long, painful lesson in how invisible I was willing to let myself become just to be accepted. Camille didn't have a wedding planner. That was me. I did everything from flower samples to food tastings to fitting appointments, all while unemployed and managing my own anxiety behind a tight smile. And after all of that, she told me she didn't want my fiancé Adam to attend. We've been together for 12 years. 12. But Camille said no. She invited my siblings' partners, people who had only been around for 2 or 3 years, some of whom I barely knew. But Adam, people will ask about your wedding, and I don't want the attention taken away from mine. That moment felt like a fracture. And still, I tried to smooth it over. I told her I wouldn't do another thing for her wedding unless she invited Adam. Eventually she did, begrudgingly. No apology, no warmth in her voice, just a cold, "Fine, he can come." I wish I could say that was enough, but the hurt lingered. The day of the wedding was beautiful on the surface. Camille looked radiant. The ceremony was elegant, the flowers perfect, and for a few hours I tried to hold on to hope that things would be okay between us. But then came the reception. Adam and I entered the venue last after helping my mom gather a few last-minute items from the car. When we found our names on the seating chart, I stopped breathing for a second.
We weren't at the family table. We weren't at any adult table. We were seated at the back, beside the kitchen, with children, 7 to 14-year-olds, talking about cartoons and school projects. I thought it was a mistake. I really did. I approached Camille gently, not wanting to embarrass her. "Hey," I said, "I think something's off with the seating chart." She didn't even blink. She said, "No mistake," she said. "That's where you belong. You and Adam. At the kids' table. Far away." I looked at her and realized this wasn't just pettiness. It was cruelty. Her husband, Victor, overheard us and looked horrified. "That's not right," he whispered to me. But when Camille caught his eye, she gave him a look that made him go quiet. He never said another word to me the entire night. At the end of the evening, Victor quietly apologized to my parents, told them he hadn't known. But he never apologized to me, not because he didn't want to, but because Camille had forbidden it. I stayed. I smiled, but I didn't give a maid of honor speech. I just couldn't. And when my parents realized where I was seated, they were furious, hurt for me, but no one else cared. My siblings didn't ask where I was, didn't wonder why I wasn't at their table. And when they heard I wouldn't speak, my two younger brothers cornered me near the restroom. They told me I was selfish, that Camille was under a lot of stress, that you're only a bride once. And I just stood there, shrinking under their words, trying not to cry. Later that night, Adam and I left quietly and got dinner at a nearby McDonald's. I took a photo of our trays, lukewarm fries, 2 half-eaten burgers, and posted it on my story with the caption, "Post-wedding meal." I waited until the reception ended before I posted. I didn't want to seem like I ditched. But even that was twisted into something cruel. My siblings messaged me the next day, calling me dramatic, bitter, accusing me of attacking Camille online. To this day, Camille says she did nothing wrong. She claims I deserved that table because I didn't plan the wedding exactly the way she wanted, because I looked too pretty in my dress, because I had insisted that Adam be there. She even told me flat out she needed to punish me. And I let her. I let her humiliate me in front of 150 people because I wanted peace, because I thought maybe this time she'd see me. She didn't. And now as I plan my own wedding, all I can feel is this overwhelming silence, because I know I don't want any of them there. Just my parents. Just the people who've actually loved me back. My parents were the only ones who truly understood why I didn't want to invite the rest of the family to my wedding. They didn't call me petty. They didn't ask me to be the bigger person. They just quietly stood by me, the way they always had when things fell apart. But my siblings, they called me childish, dramatic, selfish. They said I was ruining the family, that I was holding a grudge. But none of them seemed to remember how it felt to be cast aside at someone else's wedding, treated like an inconvenience simply because I had the audacity to exist beside someone I love. Adam and I are planning a small destination wedding, just a few friends, some people who actually care about us, and my parents. We're paying for everything with our own savings, every dollar we've put aside over the last 5 years, skipping vacations, eating in, quietly dreaming of one day walking down the aisle. And now, after everything, they expect me to spend that money on people who made me feel like a burden? No. If they didn't mind excluding me when it was convenient for them, then they shouldn't be surprised when I return the favor. I didn't stop being their sibling. They just stopped treating me like one. Some people online tried to make sense of it. One person suggested that maybe Camille didn't hate Adam, maybe she just hated that I had him. But I know the truth. Camille never really had an issue with Adam. She never mentioned him much at all. In fact, I don't think she ever saw him as a person, just as a symbol of something she couldn't control. Adam and I met when I was 18. He's been by my side through everything. The hospital visits, the seizures, the uncertainty of living with epilepsy. And through it all, he never once made me feel less. He's not just my fiancé, he's my best friend, my anchor. And Camille always hated that. Not him, me. Because I had something before she did. A relationship, an engagement, a future. She once told me I thought I'd never get married, that no one would want the burden of dealing with my condition. I remember those words like they were burned into my skin. Her husband, Paul, was her first boyfriend. She rushed into it. She'd been obsessed with having kids before 30, with hitting milestones. When she turned 29 and still wasn't engaged, she started booking wedding vendors anyway, without a proposal. She was determined to beat me to the altar, even if it meant dragging someone there by force. And she did. She made it before me, but not because she loved first, only because she refused to come second. After I got engaged, she told me I couldn't get married before her. I laughed at the time. I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. She meant it. She meant every word. And she never forgave me for being happy. Not long ago, I posted an update. I had avoided sharing too much before, but I figured it was time to explain how deep this really went. I come from a family of 5. Camille is the oldest, then our sister Delia, then me. 2 younger brothers after that. Camille and Delia are inseparable, practically the same person in different fonts. They've always had each other. And me? I was the middle child, the invisible one. Growing up, I was sick a lot, in and out of hospitals, missing school. I stayed home with our parents while my siblings went out and lived their lives. They bonded with each other while I bonded with IV drips and pediatric nurses. I thought that made me lucky in some way. I had a closer relationship with our parents, but I didn't know it made my siblings resent me. They envied the attention I got, the quiet care, the nights our moms slept beside me just to make sure I was still breathing. So when Camille asked me to be maid of honor, I was hopeful. I thought maybe she was trying to reconnect. Maybe this would be our moment, that mythical sister bond people talk about. But no, I was never the first choice. Turns out she made both me and Delia maids of honor, but I was only there to do the work. Delia got the praise, the speeches, the spotlight. I was the help in a dress. I should have seen it coming. While I was being scolded by my brothers for not doing a speech, Delia was on stage, tearfully proclaiming how much she loved Camille, calling all our siblings up to toast the happy couple, all while I stood at the back, wiping tears from my eyes, trying to slip away before anyone noticed. But of course, they noticed. And somehow, I became the villain. Again. There were so many little moments growing up that I now realize were never little at all. Camille once told me I was a burden to the family because of my epilepsy, that if I hadn't been so sick all the time, maybe our parents could have paid more attention to everyone else. When I was 16, she dumped out all my makeup into the bathroom sink and soaked it, just because I moved her towel to reach my toothbrush. I remember standing there, watching the water wash away all those colors I'd saved up to buy. I didn't even cry. I just cleaned it up like I always did. She used to call me stupid, said I had a low IQ, even after I earned my architecture license and a master's degree. She said it in front of her friends once, trying to humiliate me, just because one of them asked for my number. She laughed like it was a joke, but it didn't feel like one. And when I told her about my dream of getting married at the little historic church in Silver Falls, the one I'd visited during college, she went out of her way to book it for her own wedding, even though she'd never mentioned it before. That was the moment Adam sat me down and said, "We'll go somewhere else, somewhere far away, somewhere that's just ours." And that's how we decided on a destination wedding. Not because it was trendy or glamorous, but because it was the only way I could get married without feeling like I had to beg for space in my own life. To this day, Camille still insists I'm the one who ruined everything, all because I got upset over the seating arrangement. We haven't spoken since. And honestly, I don't think we ever will. So here's what we're doing instead. Adam and I will elope, quietly. Just us, a few friends, and the people who've loved us without conditions. We're having a small ceremony in a coastal chapel, simple, meaningful, followed by a celebration on the beach, and then 5 days of island hopping around the Philippines with the people that matter most. We're paying for it all ourselves, every cent, because that way no one gets to tell us who belongs there. This was the budget we originally set aside for a wedding in Italy, but we decided memories were more important than appearances. We wanted something warm, something soft, and above all, something safe. When we return home, we'll host a small family lunch, about 80 guests, give or take. Our parents offered to help pay for it, and in exchange, they get to handle the guest list. If my siblings show up, I won't protest. I'll just be too busy celebrating my new life to care. We'll still have a father-daughter dance, cut the cake, laugh under the string lights. There'll be piñatas, a brick oven for fresh pizza, a coffee and pretzel stand, and the most incredible Italian buffet we could find. Fresh fruit, cheeses, and all the things that remind us of the life we're building. And the seating plan? It's not about revenge, but it is about boundaries. Picture a long, winding table, like something from a Mamma Mia scene. Adam and I will sit at the center with our parents and his brothers beside us. At the far end, as close to the kitchen as possible without being obvious, there will be a small cluster of seats reserved for my siblings. They'll be with each other, but just not with me. And I feel nothing about it. Not joy, not anger, just a quiet indifference. They've chipped away at me for so long that there's no space left to feel anything toward them at all. Camille asked to be my maid of honor. Of course she did. But she won't be there at all. Not for the ceremony, not for the vows. If she's invited to the lunch, it'll be out of courtesy. And even then, she'll be set aside just like I was asked to shrink myself for her. Our wedding day will be for us. Not for apologies, not for amends, just peace. The ceremony is ours. The beach is ours. The silence, finally, is ours. I used to envy people with normal families, the ones who didn't flinch at holiday dinners or worry about passive-aggressive texts disguised as concern. But thankfully, Adam's family, calm, kind, genuinely supportive, showed me that love could be easy, that it didn't have to come with strings and silent resentment. So, after everything with Camille and my siblings, I took a step back. I read all the messages people had sent, the thoughtful comments, the support from strangers who somehow understood me better than my own siblings ever did. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was the problem. I'd convinced myself I was being dramatic, that I was overreacting, that maybe Camille didn't mean it to be cruel. But you helped me see it clearly. The humiliation, the isolation, the years of small cuts, I wasn't imagining any of it. I wasn't being sensitive. I was just tired of pretending it didn't hurt. Someone commented, "But you'll still invite them to the party, right?" It's like saying, "No matter what, come celebrate with me." And no, that's not what this is. My wedding is mine. They're not invited to that. Just the lunch 2 weeks after. By then, I'll be a wife, already done celebrating with people who actually cared enough to show up for me emotionally. Let them start whatever drama they want at the lunch. At that point, it'll only make them look bad. I'll be sitting with Adam, glass of wine in hand, and I won't even flinch. Some people tried to explain away my siblings' behavior, said maybe they were jealous because I was sick growing up and got more attention. I thought about that for a long time. And yes, I was sick often. My seizures were unpredictable, and I missed a lot of school. I didn't have many friends back then, so I spent my time with my mom. She's my best friend to this day. But my parents, they never neglected my siblings. They did everything they could to divide their time fairly. To this day, they still try, and I'll defend them for the rest of my life. They were kind, present, and if my siblings couldn't see that because they resented a child for needing medical care, then maybe that says more about them than about me. It wasn't until my 20s that the jealousy truly surfaced, when I got into grad school, when Adam proposed, when I started finding real happiness, and it was always Camille who reacted the worst. The others followed her lead like clockwork. Anyway, I know what matters now, and I finally have something that's just mine. 9 months after I last posted, I came back with an update. We did it. We got married. Not just any wedding, it was everything I'd dreamed of and more. And the best part? It was peaceful. We told everyone we were delaying the wedding to focus on a destination bachelor and bachelorette trip. What they didn't know was that the trip was the wedding. We arrived in Bora Cave early, just the two of us to settle in. A few days later, our closest friends joined us. We spent time swimming, laughing, drinking cold beer under the sun, and the night before the ceremony, we told them. We said, "Tomorrow, we're getting married." And they cried with us. Real tears, happy ones. We asked them to wear tropical outfits, and that morning we all got ready together. The girls did each other's hair, passed around one old digital camera, hugged until our makeup smudged. The guys played football and teased Adam about the ring. There were no videographers, no drones, just memories sealed in our hearts, and a few grainy photos to match. I'd always loved flowers, but didn't want the hassle of finding a florist abroad, so I let that dream go. Except Adam didn't. While I was distracted, he spoke to the hotel staff and arranged the most beautiful bouquet of my favorite blooms. And when I walked into the little white chapel and saw the entire aisle lined with flowers, I broke. Ugly cried. Mascara-streaked hands holding my heart in my chest kind of cry. And he was waiting for me, smiling through tears of his own. I knew he missed his brother, so I surprised him too. I flew his best men in the day before, and when they appeared that morning, Adam just whispered, "You brought them here?" I nodded. He didn't say anything else, just hugged them. And then hugged me. At 4 p.m., in the glow of the island sun, we said, "I do." And for once, nobody tried to ruin it. Not Camille, not my brothers, not the shadow of who I used to be. Just me, Adam, and the people who had chosen us without hesitation. After the ceremony, Adam and I walked hand in hand down the shore and headed to the small hotel where dinner was waiting for us on the beach. Nothing extravagant, no crystal glasses or gold-plated forks, just grilled seafood, a few local dishes, and warm wind brushing against our skin. It was peaceful, gentle, and for the first time in a long while, we were genuinely happy. A few days before we left, I had sent out a seating chart to the family group chat, not because I expected drama, but because I wanted to avoid it. I thought maybe if they saw their names ahead of time, they'd keep their tempers in check. Everyone assumed the seating chart was for the reception after our wedding. They didn't realize it was just for a lunch we'd be hosting 2 weeks later. That's when the bitterness in me surfaced, just a little. At the center table, Adam and I would sit surrounded by our parents and his 2 brothers. Meanwhile, all of my siblings were placed at the furthest ends of the table, technically included, but clearly removed. There was one seat in particular I took special care in arranging. A single chair, far in the back, tagged as the breastfeeding area, labeled with Camille's name. She was furious. But I just smiled and said I figured she'd appreciate the privacy. Of course, she didn't come. None of them did. They saw our decision to elope as an unforgivable insult, especially because Adam's brothers were included. They called up extended relatives, tried to convince them not to attend, painted me as ungrateful and vindictive. A few family members backed out, said they didn't support the marriage, that I was cutting blood ties. In the end, 58 people came, and it was perfect. The venue was Adam's family farm just outside of Eugene. Tall grass, wildflowers, a sky so open it made everything else feel small. We didn't spend much decorating. Nature already did that for us. We played music from a playlist we built together, filled with songs that had marked the small moments of our relationship. Photos were taken by friends. Nothing posed, just snapshots of laughter, food, and quiet affection. Adam and I baked our wedding cake with my mom 2 nights before, lemon with cream cheese frosting. It was lopsided, and it was beautiful. My bouquet came from flowers I picked up at the morning market, arranged by my bridesmaids while we drank coffee barefoot in the kitchen.
I wore a dress I already owned, one that made me feel like myself. We didn't ask for gifts. Instead, we invited guests to bring a dish if they wanted. A potluck of love, really. We still hired a few fun things, a pizza oven, a pretzel stand, and a tiny coffee bar in the corner of the barn. It wasn't Pinterest perfect. It was better. We designed our invites ourselves, sent them via email. My siblings never received theirs, though Camille's husband did, no +1. Her C-section was scheduled a week before the luncheon. And yes, I knew that. I planned it that way. Call it timing, call it self-preservation, call it karma. All I know is I finally stopped making room for people who never left any for me. They were furious, but we were fine. And that's what stung them the most. Not the exclusion, but the fact that we were unaffected. That I didn't cry, or beg, or even care. The louder someone screams to convince others of their version of the truth, the more unstable that truth becomes. That's what I've learned. I didn't have to go no contact with my siblings. They chose that themselves. One by one, they dropped off the map, removed me from the family group chat. The last thing I heard was that Camille gave birth. Her husband sent a one-line message. That was it. No apology, no change. They still talk about us behind our backs, still try to tear Adam down, still act like I was the one who lit the match.
But we've moved on. With the money we saved, we surprised our parents with a vacation, 7 days away, somewhere quiet, where they could rest and just be happy for us. They helped us with the down payment for our house, and this was our thank you. We donated the leftover flowers and sent the extra food home with guests. Everything felt warm, earned, real. Weddings are supposed to be about love, and ours was. Our friends, our parents, even our dogs, every single soul there was someone who wanted to see us happy. And as for my siblings, I don't know what they're doing. I don't ask. I just hope that one day they finally stop hurting. Because I already have. Thank you for walking with me through all of this. It's been both painful and healing to share. Hearing from others who've lived through similar wounds helped me realize that what I experienced wasn't normal. That emotional abuse, even when it comes from siblings, still leaves scars that deserve to be acknowledged. This is your forever forgotten middle child, your kids' table maid of honor, finally signing off. And yes, for those who asked, this somehow ended up on TikTok and YouTube. Camille, if you're watching, well, I'm not sorry. Not for speaking the truth, not for choosing peace, and definitely not for taking back the space I was never given. And also, to those wondering why I never updated until now, the answer is morning sickness, times 2. And to clear one last thing up, yes, Camille and the rest of them assumed they'd be invited to our original Italy wedding, because that's what family expects, right? But they knew our plans changed, and I made it my mission to gently, quietly ensure that they never made it onto the final list. Not out of cruelty, but because family, real family, doesn't humiliate you, then expect cake afterward. Some people blamed my parents for the dynamic, but I can't. I won't. They did their best in a house where resentment grew louder than understanding. I was sick, but I never used my pain to hurt anyone else. That was a choice my siblings made, and they're old enough now to own it. This is the last you'll hear from me on this. Maybe one day they'll change. Maybe they won't. Either way, I'm not waiting anymore. If this story speaks to something you've lived through, please remember, it's okay to walk away from toxic relationships, even when they share your blood. Loyalty doesn't mean self-sacrifice, and forgiveness doesn't mean inviting people back in to hurt you again. A few things to carry with you. Pay attention to patterns. If someone repeatedly belittles you, isolates you, or manipulates you under the guise of family duty, that's not love. That's control. You're allowed to set boundaries. You don't owe anyone access to your peace, your celebrations, or your healing. Saying no is a form of self-respect. Healing isn't loud. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is quietly remove yourself, grow somewhere safe, and stop trying to prove your pain. Support matters. Build a chosen family. People who love you for who you are, not who they want you to be. That love is real, and it is enough. You deserve joy. You deserve gentleness. And most of all, you deserve to feel like you belong, even if you have to build that space yourself.